friends, and welcome back to my channel, Diary of Fiction. So today we have a calming, relaxing, cozy little video that maybe you can put in the background to listen to or to give you some company. I just recently got some new little candles that I'm in love with, like perfect cozy little ambience to have while it's raining as well in the background. I'm not sure if you can hear it though, because I can't really hear it from here. Today I just wanted to talk about all the books that I read this fall. I am so excited to share all of my thoughts and feelings. It is my first reading wrap up, but also a book recommendations video, because I just feel like all of these books are amazing recommendations and books that you should pick up if you haven't yet, because I'm falling in love with them, some of them more than others, but I feel like they're still great books and I still really want to recommend them and see if they're maybe for you. So let's get started with the video. So first up in the pile of books that I have here from books that I read from my physical TBR, we have Vicious by Schwab. So this makes me so happy because I remember when I was filming one of my first videos on this channel, if you go way back a few months ago, when I said how much I really wanted to read this book, and I've been wanting to read this book since years ago. I feel like since this book came out, when all of my like favorite booktubers were talking about it and it had a completely different cover, and let me just say, because of that cover, that original cover, I had completely wrong expectations about the book. I don't know about you, but when I look at this cover, I think of like villain origin story and like Doofenshmirtz for some reason. But anyway, I went in with the wrong expectations, even though like this entire time of knowing about this book, I never knew what it was about because I just didn't want to know. Like I just didn't want to know. I had heard it's better to just read it without knowing too much. So all these years, every time somebody would mention Vicious, I would just go like la la la, I don't know what you're talking about. Like I was just gonna pick it up. So definitely my expectations came from the cover more than anything else. Like I had no idea what the book was about. So as I read this book, I was completely blown away by the writing style, the way that V. Schwab was able to construct this story through like different perspective and timelines. So let me just get into what the book is about. Basically, this book opens up with our main character Victor at this graveyard. He's like digging at this graveyard accompanied by a girl who we learn a little bit about in that first chapter. And we as readers are completely confused as to how we got to that situation, what is going on. It definitely is very atmospheric, really transports you into the story. Like I could see everything vividly. And then it just takes you back 10 years ago when Victor was attending Lakeland University and he was a regular college student. He had a roommate and they were assigned this research project. And basically his roommate, Eli, chooses to do this project on EOs. EOs basically are humans with supernatural abilities. And so his roommate really wants to get into that and figure out how is it that they acquired the supernatural abilities and perhaps try to become one himself. And so the story starts from there and you go back and forth between the timelines trying to figure out how they ended up in the situation in the first place. Why are they at the graveyard? What happened? Are they still friends? You know, all these questions that you have from then and now, because it's been like 10 years. I would say that because I thought it was more of a fantasy, or I guess I thought it would have more fantastical elements, but it was very much like regular college students and just like this whole concept of EOs, which I found really interesting. It is a very dark book as well, so I would definitely check content warnings for it. But personally, I thought this book was amazing. At first, I gave it like 4 stars. That was my original rating for it. And I think the reason why that is because I wasn't able to fully connect with the characters. But now it's been weeks since I read this and I can't stop thinking about these characters. I can't stop thinking about all the twists and turns in the story, everything that happened and went on. I can't stop thinking about it. So I am now bumping my rating to a 5 stars, and this has now become one of my all-time favorite books because I don't know, I just can't stop thinking about it and I definitely want to reread it. I definitely want to read Benchbulb, which is the second book. But yeah, it's a really interesting concept. The whole time I just kept thinking like, how did V. Schwab come up with this? And the writing, like let's try to find an example of how beautiful the writing is. Okay, so this is page 17, very beginning of the story. It says, but what fascinated Victor the most was the fact that something about Eli was decidedly wrong. He was like one of those pictures full of small errors, the kind you could only pick out by searching the image from every angle. And even then, a few always slipped by. On the surface, Eli seemed perfectly normal, but now and then Victor would catch a crack, a sideways glance, a moment when his roommate's face and his words, his look and his meaning would not line up. Those fleeting slices fascinated Victor. It was like watching two people, one hiding in the other's skin, and their skin was always too dry, on the verge of cracking and showing the color of the thing beneath. like introducing a character like that, it definitely builds the tension between these two friends and roommates and sort of starts off that question, the big question of what actually happened between them. So Vicious by V.E. Schwab. Highly recommend. Let's put it back on the shelf. Okay, next I have One for My Enemy by Olivie Blake. I love this book so much. This book is a book that made me happy. It's just a book that made me absolutely happy. I went into this book just knowing that Olivie Blake had beautiful writing style, which I 110% agree with. I was completely mesmerized by her writing style. In one single sentence, she could make me feel so many things, and I will say it over and over again. Her writing is beautiful. But all I knew as well was that this book focused on two rival witch families, and this is when I sort of started entering like a witch phase. I really thought it was like Gossip Girl with witches. I've been talking about Gossip Girl so much, but it's because it's literally consumed my life at the moment because I'm rewatching it with my partner and making him rewatch it, and now he's obsessed with it, and now I'm back in like my 14-year-old self watching that show. But anyway, back to the book. In this book, we're following two families, the Antonovas and the Fedorov. So they are both rivals against each other because they run their own criminal empires that are in competition with one another in the market. So because of their rivalry that honestly has been inherited from their parents to their children, children are not supposed to interact with each other or have some sort of relationship with one another. It is a reimagining of Romeo and Juliet, so you can imagine that there's going to be forbidden romance happening between the Antonova sisters and the Fedorov brothers. This book is set in modern world, modern Manhattan, so the interactions between one another does feel very modern, like they're texting and things like that, but at the same time it doesn't feel cheesy. I was actually giggling while reading their interactions. You get to really see all these different characters, you get into their stories, where they come from, their own situation. I really like learning about the sisters. Like you got the older sister, what she was going through, the younger sister that wanted to pursue a college career which was different from anybody else in her family, so that was really interesting. And then there's like skimming, there's a lot of questions about loyalty, family relationships, family dynamics, you know, if you want to follow your heart versus what your family tells you to follow. I just love this book. It's one of those books that will just make you smile. Let's find a quote in here as well. No, it's because I can't even read that one because it would be a spoiler. Let's find another one because that one's gonna make me cry. Oh yes, there's tragedies in this book, and I would say that the second half of this book actually, like I felt like the tone slightly changed and it was a lot more maybe like gory and darker than the very first half. The first half feels a lot more like modern style, like you're in real life, whatever, and then the second half starts to get witchy and gory, and I love that contrast between both parts. One's lines are crossed and people's loyalties are on the surface. Like, let's see what I can find. I can't read the quote that I found even though I really love it. Like, descriptions like this. Dmitry Fedorov was the sun, the moon, and the stars. His mother had whispered to him when he was a boy, Dima, you are the sun, the moon, and the stars. She had meant that he was her entire universe. And probably he was. Her world was very small. Like, it's a very character-driven story. If you love character-driven stories and you also love really good banter and also like witchy vibes and gothic vibes, New York setting, romance, yearning, crying, suffering, pain, pick up this book. I'm sorry my review is not very cohesive, but I just hope you know how much I really love this book and how much I really recommend it. And I'm just gonna read all of Olivie Blake's books now. 100%. Alright, next up we have a very well-loved book, and that is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I've seen this book absolutely everywhere, and what made me want to pick it up is the cover. The cover is so gorgeous. I love it so much. And this book follows a really interesting concept and a really interesting magic system. The only thing is I wasn't fully able to connect with the character as much as I would have wanted to. And that's what made me rate this book a little bit lower than the books that I read, because I couldn't fully connect with the characters or the writing style. But like I said, in terms of like the magic system and the setting in this book, it was great. We're following our main character, Elspeth Spindle. I'm sorry, like that's a really hard name to say. Basically, her entire life, she she's lived with this monster inside her head who she calls the nightmare. And it's like this voice inside her head that whispers to her every now and then and has this very like comical humor as they interact and banter with each other in her head, which I feel like also made the book seem a little bit younger than it is. And so this has been her secret for like 11 years, because if anyone were to find out, she would be in terrible danger. And in this world there are like this magical cards that give you special powers depending on which card you have, and this whole book is kind of like a heist book where they're trying to find all these cards to try to save the kingdom. And the plot was interesting, but I felt like I wanted a little bit more from it in terms of like action. Some characters as well weren't as explored. It is a little bit insta-lovey. I wasn't very connected to the romance in the story, but it is a very entertaining read that I think if you're looking for something fast-paced or just a distraction from the real world, I would pick this up because it truly does feel like the perfect escapism. I do really want to read the second book in the story because the book ended how I thought it would end it. Like I did predict how it was going to end, and I want to see how the author goes around that. Like I want to see how she continues the story in the second book, and I also want to explore the other characters a little bit more in depth because I was getting them a little bit confused, to be honest, and maybe it was me who wasn't making that effort to actually get to know who was who, but I was getting them a little bit confused. But again, it's like a very simple, fun, entertaining read, and I will continue the second book in the series since it's just a duology. But yeah, I want to see more character development, more character growth, more interactions between them. There were definitely some very interesting aspects in terms of like the magic. It just definitely feels like all those things that you loved in early young adult books all put in one book. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you just need a book like this. That's why I think it's still a really great recommendation, and I want to still really recommend this book if you're looking for that, like escapism, if you're feeling nostalgic about books you used to love when you were younger, like Divergent, Shadow and Bone trilogy, like all those books, pick this up. It's like the same feeling, just more adult. So next up we have a book that I didn't get to put in any video, but I did read this and I'm very excited that I did, and that is Juniper and Thorn by Reid. This is the same author from Aid Studying Drowning, a book that I've mentioned infinite times on my channel and said how much I adore it, and I still don't have a physical copy. I recently saw the special edition. It's so pretty. It's so pretty. But anyway, I wanted to read this book because I had heard that Hannah from A Clocker Reader had absolutely loved this book. It is one of her all-time favorite books, and one of the things that I knew when diving into this book was that she had mentioned that this book is deeply misunderstood. So I really went into it with an open mind. If you search this book up on Goodreads, you'll see that it doesn't have really high great reviews. I think it has like a 3 point something average rating, and I feel like that could turn people away from picking it up. Going back to Studying Drowning, that book also has like an average rating of 3 point something, and I thought it was an amazing book. So I don't always trust ratings. I try not to look at them before picking up a book that actually sounds interesting to me. It's kind of hard sometimes not to get influenced in that way, but I prefer to still give the book a try if it still sounds interesting to me. And because I really loved Reid's writing style in that book, and because of Hannah's recommendation, who I absolutely trust because I feel like we share similar tastes, I just wanted to give this book a chance. So there were a lot of feelings that came out of reading this book. First of all, before saying anything, this is the one book that I would highly encourage to look at content warnings for. It is one of the darkest, most disturbing books that I've read. Definitely an adult book, so don't pick this up if you're younger, but you know, I wouldn't. This book is at the surface a retelling of a Grimm's brother tale called the Juniper Tree? The Juniper Tree. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know anything about the Juniper Tree. I knew a little bit about the Grimm's brothers, and I still was able to, I feel like, understand. Maybe it would have added another layer of understanding if I would have known a little bit more about the Juniper Tree, but regardless, I'm gonna tell you still my thoughts. So basically, we're following our main character. Her name is, what's her name? Marlin Chen. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to pronounce that. And she lives with her 2 sisters. They're a witch family, and they are living with their father, who is very abusive and controlling and does not let them leave the house whatsoever. They basically are forced to stay inside and work for him and for the business that they have. That's the only time where they're ever like interacting with people from outside. And the main character specifically is the one who has to serve him food and all that. But one day, her and her sisters escape and leave for a night, and they go to this ballet theater where she gets to see this performance, and she immediately falls in love with one of the dancers, the main dancer. And so the story goes from there, from where she gets the first contact with the outside world, and it's sort of her leaving the cycle, this abusive cycle in which she's in, where she's absolutely terrified of the outside world because that's what she's been taught. She's been taught that if she goes outside, something is going to happen to her. She's also disobeying her father by doing that. So obviously she is really struggling to find herself. I really love the way in which that was described, how she would say how there's another version of me outside and there's this version of me inside. And so it is about that connection that she has with the dancer, but also of her really finding herself, standing up for herself. Like I said, there are very explicit graphic scenes in this story, which I can see why a lot of people wouldn't probably like it, because at points it was very hard to read, very heavy. You're in our main character's mind the entire time, and you see how much she is struggling, how much in pain she is, and how difficult her situation is, and that's not always really easy to read. There are a lot of like moments that make you feel uncomfortable and really just grossed out. There's just a lot of like disgusting moments. Also, she's just like a very lonely character trying to find her way in the world and saving herself, basically. Like I said, I went into it with a really open mind, trying to figure out what the underlining message of it was, because at a surface level I feel like you could just see like the very dark, weird scenes happening, but when you dive deeper and you try to understand the meaning of it, by the end of it, I was just so impressed by the work of Ava Reid and the story she created. It's definitely a really dark fairy tale, but also a really important story and very powerful story. And even if some scenes were very like disgusting, honestly they're not too far away from reality. And so in a lot of ways, like the way she used like imagery and fantastical elements in this world to describe certain things that happen in a real world, it was just an impressive novel. But again, expect those things that I mentioned, but I am gonna continue reading from Ava Reid because every book that I've read by her I feel like has some sort of deeper message behind it that is definitely about women and situations that women find themselves in. So Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid. I kind of want to read this book next. The Wolf and the Woodsman, I think that's the book that I want to read next by her, but I definitely want to have an Ava Reid collection. So we have If We Were Villains by Emma Rio. This is the last and final book that I read and recently got as well. I feel like a lot of the books on my fall TBR I didn't read. I read a majority of books that weren't on my fall TBR, but I ended up buying, and for some reason I went through those faster than the ones that have been on my shelves forever. But anyway, this book, I had mixed feelings about it, which was a little bit disappointing. I think in the beginning, it started off really strong. It is, like I mentioned in the vlog in which I read it, very similar to Vicious, and in terms of structure, where you are in the aftermath of what happened. So basically, it opens up with our main character, Oliver, who is basically the perspective that you're following this entire book. He is being interrogated by this investigator who is trying to figure out what is it that happened, and he is finally being released from prison after 10 years. So you know that somehow he had something to do with what happened because he's the one who got punished for it, but it almost looks like he's the only one. So then you go back 10 years back in time where he tells a story of how he was going to this university to study to become a Shakespeare actor. It's him and a group of 6 other students who are, you know, who become very close until one night where everything changes, and you see how each of these characters is really dealing with the situation of what happened, how they're processing it, and what they're choosing to hide or tell. But basically, I don't want to get too into it because again, it's the mystery is the whole part of the story. It's what you need to figure out. It's what keeps you reading, trying to figure out what happened. So I don't want to give too many details away. I would say though that the parts that I personally struggled with was that I wasn't able to fully connect with the characters characters. I didn't really love a lot of decisions that the main character made, and like I feel like that's expected because these are supposed to be like very pretentious characters that you're not supposed to like necessarily root for. But yeah, a lot of the decisions that our main character made me really frustrated and angry, and obviously a lot of decisions that other characters made as well. But because we were basically just learning about him, like I was just frustrated the entire time. Like it dragged at some points because we were just trying to figure out this whole mystery, and I was like, please just go faster because I want to figure out how it ends and I want to know. And like I was able to predict how this book ended as well, and honestly that prediction that I had, I really wanted for that to happen, but it was the way that the delivery happened that didn't work for me. Like the way it was written, the way it was revealed, like there was so much missing from that, and by the end of it I was left wanting more. I feel like a lot of the characters, there wasn't too much character development. We got to know them from the perspective of our self-centered main character, and then we didn't get to see them. Like I said also in that reading vlog that they almost felt like they were just playing characters, right? And maybe that's what the author intended to do, but it was like if you go see, like when you're watching a Disney movie and you know that one of the characters is just the humorous sidekick and that's just only what he is and there's no depth to him, it feels like a one-dimensional character. That's kind of what I felt like. These characters were just placed in boxes, like this character is supposed to be this character is supposed to be that, this character is supposed to be this, and they just fall into that character so much. Maybe that's just the meaning of it, and there's no development. They just stay in that path until the very end, and I wish we would have gotten a lot more from them, especially all the female characters in this book. I feel like they weren't as explored, and like they were just perceived in certain ways that I wasn't really happy with, and I just wish we would have just gotten more. If you want to see me rant more about it, you can go watch that vlog, but unfortunately this one didn't work for me as much as I would have loved. I can see how a lot of people love it. It has amazing writing style. The setting, the description of the setting, beautiful. The campus, the seasonal transitions, you go from like all the way from Halloween to like February. That aspect of the book I did really love, and how natural the dialogue felt between the characters, but other than that it didn't give me much. By the end of it I needed more. But again, it's still a book that I would recommend still because I think other people could enjoy it, and I could see how other people really love it and consider it one of their favorite books. It just personally wasn't mine, but I still think it's a good book to try out and see if you like it. But yeah, let me know your thoughts if you've read this, what you thought about it, please. Let's put it again in the shelf. I love how this Dark Academia like little shelf that I have is starting to look. It just makes me so happy. And I have two like books that are not really Dark Academia, but they're there in the meantime. It looks so cute. I love it. Alright, now moving on to the 3 books that I read through the library. The first one was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandanna. This is one of the coziest, cutest books that I've ever read. This is a book I would highly recommend if you're just looking for a little cozy, cute time to be wrapped up in a blanket and just be transported into this magical little world with like witches. It's so cute. Basically, we're following our main character who, oh my gosh, what was her name? Hold on. Mika. And Mika basically is a witch, of course. And she has been taught, however, her entire life that witches are supposed to stay alone and live alone and not tell anybody about their powers, just to be like very not trustworthy of anybody with their magic. So her entire life she's just been moving from one place to another, never really settling and finding her own community. She does attend this regular meetings with other witches who share their own experience and like how they've told like maybe their partners about it, or maybe they haven't, and she has like a little therapy sessions with each other. And she herself in her personal life, however, has created like a TikTok account, like a social media account, where she makes videos about her being a witch. She really doesn't think that anybody is actually going to believe that she's a witch, because it could be a filter or just like video editing that can make it look like she's a witch. So she just does it for fun. But then in this other place called the Nowhere House, there's a character who sees her TikToks and thinks this person is what we need. Because at this Nowhere House, there are 3 young witches who need tutoring, or they are actually seeking tutoring for. So somebody who can show them how to use their magic powers now that they're like really young, and basically teach them about what being a witch is like. So they DM her and they DM Mika and they ask her if she would be their tutor. Mika at first obviously sees the message and she's like, who is this person? But eventually goes to the nowhere house and meets the children. It's like very wholesome, very heartwarming, because obviously her entire life she's been trying to seek that sense of community and she hasn't found it. And it's even more special because Mika is actually an adult. She's in her 30s, and I feel like there's like this constant pressure of having to find your friends like really early on in life, whereas like it doesn't have to be like that. You can find your people at any time or age in your life, and I think that's what was really beautiful for me, seeing her really find eventually a community of people she could rely on, and like finding herself finally settled somewhere. That was the whole message, was really pretty, made my heart smile. So this is a book that I don't own, but I would definitely purchase it for myself because I had such a great time reading it. There's also a little bit of mystery, and I love that as well. If when you were younger you watched Casper and Wendy, I love this movie when I was younger. Like that magical aspect of like being a witch, I definitely felt in this story, just like the coziness of it all. So yeah, a wonderful book. It also has romance in it, if that's another thing you're looking for, and you get like different perspectives as well. I highly recommend this book if you haven't read it yet. The next book that I wanted to talk about was Fangs, and this is by Sarah Andersen. This book is a graphic novel that you can read in like a few minutes. If you are literally having maybe like a bad day and just want to clear your mind for a second, just pick up this book because it will make you really happy. It's like the perfect humorous, like cozy little read because you're following a vampire and a werewolf who fall in love, and it's just like little scenes from their relationship, from the first time that they meet to their first date, like just like different slice of life like moments in their life that are put into one page, and you can't help but laugh. Like the way that you would imagine these two characters interacting because of like one being a werewolf and the other one being a vampire, that's exactly what it is. It's so funny and I highly recommend for a good time. And honestly, love the illustrations as well. So creative, very creative. The next book I read in a vlog, but I'm actually not gonna talk about it because I found some things about the author that someone commented that I wasn't aware of when I made that vlog, and now I no longer support them, so we're gonna move on to the next book. Wait, never mind. Those are all the books. Why did I think there was one more? Those are all the books that I read this fall. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for supporting me. I recently hit 1,000 subscribers. I literally am filming this the day that I found that out, and little me, who has been wanting to start this channel for 10 years, cannot believe it. I am extremely happy. Y'all are making my dreams come true, and I am just really grateful. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you all. I hope you have a beautiful day, a beautiful rest of your week, a beautiful night, whenever you're watching this, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!